Oh, hello there. Nice to see you. Welcome to another episode of Bug Watch. I am your host, your boy Swissley, or Davey, whatever you want to call me. And I'm here today to show you some sexy ass line charts and bar charts and scatter graphs to try and tell you things about the game that you might not already know. That sounds exciting, right? And if you're at home going, well, I'm listening, Dave, so you can't really show me charts, bar charts, scatter graphs, etc. I'm going to do my best to describe them to you. So if you are here to watch someone describe bar charts and scatter graphs, you're in the right place. I'm excited with this stuff. This stuff really tickles my pickle. I think it's really interesting to see how the game changes over time. Today we're going to be looking at Pariah Nexus since the start of it. And because it's been 12 weeks of Pariah Nexus in StatCheck's database, we are going to compare that to the 12 weeks prior to Pariah Nexus, just to give us an idea of how things have changed. And it's just a really nice way of comparing and seeing what direction we're going in. So without further ado, we'll get on with it. But first of all, please like and subscribe. That would be very nice. We have tons of stuff going on the show at the moment. And it's really good with the channel more so than the show, to be honest. I've even started a new show called Blood Watch. Wonder where I got the name from. Where it's going to kind of be a narrative of my preparation for the Coventry 3-day GT in the end of October, where I'm probably going to take World Eaters just for a bit of a break, and then I'll be straight back on the NIDS, I imagine. But yes, so today we're going to be looking at data review from Pariah Nexus, and one of the things we're going to be looking at is who our best matchup is, but wait, that'll be towards the end. Alright, first of all though, we start at the top just to get an idea of what is happening. At the top, we are talking about Tyranid Players and Tyranid games. So, Pariah Nexus saw Tyranid player attendance grow 60%, amazing. This was driven by more so top 25% players in terms of skill level versus actual 75%, bottom 75%. So let's really get into this and tell you what I mean. So on the left hand side you can see the number of games played per week, total 40k. So Pariah Nexus versus the 12 weeks before saw 7% more games, but Tyranid Players saw 60% more games, which is pretty amazing. And that equals, it was 3.9% of games, and now it's 5.8% of games, which is pretty cool. So we've got lots more Tyranid players playing more games. In terms of tournament attendance, I believe it's been driven by the top 25% of players because their share of all Tyranid players has increased. So what do I mean by share? Because it's something I'll talk about a lot. It's what percentage of the total do they have, and how that changed. So for example, before in the previous 12 weeks before Pariah Nexus, 34% of Tyranid players were the top 25% of all 40k players, and now it's 43%. So that's a big increase of 9 percentage points. And if you want an actual number, like what does that actually mean? Well, basically 80 more top 25% players, or there were 80 more tournament appearances by the top 25% of players. And that is versus the bottom 75% of players who saw just 44 more. So, almost double top 25% of players. What's that telling me? It's telling me people are flocking to our wonderful faction because they want it to work so badly. And of course, that means we're overly powered, right? We're going to be really strong and have good win rates. Well, we'll see. So how does that compare to other factions, right? Because are Tyranid just attracting the average amount of top 25% of players? Or, I mean, clearly they're doing above average, but how does that compare to others? So what I've done here is I've looked at every faction and what was their share of top 25% players pre-Nexus, so to speak, and what is it after in Pariah Nexus. So we've got here that there's a bar chart, like a waterfall chart, and you can see that Dark Angels had an increase of 2.4% of their share of top 25% players, which is the number one. So they had the most players come to them from the top 25%, We are third with 2.2, so we're right behind them. So very marked difference, and only just ahead of us is Sisters of Battle. Knights have had a good 1.6 percentage points of top 25% players flock to them, etc., etc. The ones that have lost the most are Orcs. So Orcs had about 8% of top 25% players before Pariah Nexus. Now they've got 3.4%, which is really rough. Black Templars also lost a little bit. Necrons have lost a little bit. Grey Knights have lost a little bit. All factions that were very strong in the past and now have fallen off a little bit. I've also colour-coded at the bottom some of the larger represented factions. So you've got Tyranids have 5.6% of all top 25% players. They are just behind. They're number 3. Necrons still have the most top 25% of players at 6.6. And Sisters of Battle have the second most at 5.9. In terms of who's got the least top 25% players, it's the factions that just generally have the least players, to be quite honest with you. GSC, Black Templars, AdMech, but then there's some really sad ones. Space Marines. I mean, you never want Space Marines to be too good, but at 2.5%, that's pretty rough. Yeah, and the Chaos Knights as well, so they're having a rough time. I suppose I always find Knights, to be a bit straightforward, and I think if you want to really have skill expression, you probably don't play Knights too much. Although Imperial Knights have had an interesting amount of people flock to them, so there is that. So yeah, so we are attracting, we're the third most attractive faction for the top 25% of players. How about that? So where are Tyranid players playing? Well, we've seen since Pariah Nexus changes, the UK and North America saw more Tyranid players get to events, and actually UK Tyranid players win rate grew 30%. So on the left hand side, Tyranid players by region. So apologies if you are living in somewhere and you want to know somewhere outside of the UK, Europe, North America and Oceania, but the numbers are quite small, so I don't think it's very reliable. So I've just used the biggest areas. I only just used Oceania because it doesn't actually have that many events coming through. Very small numbers. But essentially, in the previous 12 weeks before Pariah Nexus, there was 12% players in the UK, 12 percentage points of all Tyranid players, only 12% were in the UK. In Pariah Nexus, now it's 21%. So that's almost double. Europe was 34%, has declined to 21%. And in North America, it was 44%, makes sense to the biggest place, but it's actually increased. It's nearly 1 in 2 Tyranid players who go to events are from America. There you go. Oceania is about the same at 10% to 9%. I've also compared this to people who watch Bugwatch. So we can see that Bugwatch, people who watch Bugwatch, 25% are from the UK, 63% are from North America. Hello, my friends across the pond. It would be lovely to get over there and play an event. Hopefully I will, because I've got one of our boys at 6++ moved over there in North Carolina. I'm desperate to get over there and have a couple of games, go to a GT or something. It'd be a lot of fun. Europe has only got 6% of Bugwatch viewers, and Oceania just 7%. So makes sense. People who don't understand this rough northern accent probably don't watch. Cool. Let's look at win rate by region, because I find that very interesting as well. The UK in the weeks before Pariah Nexus had a 37% win rate with Tyranids. I was in there as well. Hopefully I was dragging the average up. I think I was. I think my win rate with Tyranids was about 60%. So it's okay. That has increased to 48%. So we're in the Goldilocks zone. Wonderful. Europe also increased by 5 percentage points, or 12%. And then North America's also increased by 5 percentage points, or 11%, and Oceania the same, pretty much the same numbers. So really interesting to see that across the world we've seen Tyranid players not only grow, with the exception of Europe, really, and we've also seen win rates increase as well, which is super nice. Which is what we all wanted, right? We just wanted to be a little bit more competitive. We're in that Goldilocks zone. We're feeling good about it. Everything is a winner. All right. Next one. Oops. Okay, so then what detachments are people playing? So you'll see a bar chart in front of you with percentages. And you might be thinking to yourself, but if we're talking about percentages, why is each bar chart higher? Why is one bar chart higher than the other? Well, the bar charts represent the number of players, so just to give you an idea, and then you can see what percentage of that overall number is the faction. So, Invasion Fleet has increased in games, because of course it has. It's the number one detachment, and Tyranids have had more players. So it absolutely makes sense that Invasion Fleet has increased. But people have flocked to the other detachments. So therefore, it only now represents 43% of all games played with Tyranid detachments. The biggest grower is Vanguard, which is almost, well, has more than doubled to 30%. Crusher Stampede has doubled from 5 to 10%. And Synaptic Nexus has gone from 9% to 15%. Unending Swarm was 11% of all games played with Tyranids prior to Pariah Nexus, and now it's a big fat zero. No one's went to an event with Unending Swarm. That was, I was tempted to take it to the Coventry 3-day GT, but it is 8 games with Unending Swarm. Sounds a lot. Assimilation Swarm was 2% of games before Pariah Nexus and is now 3%. So that's good. That's like a 50% increase. Well done, Assimilation Swarm. So yeah, those numbers again, if you're really interested in Pariah Nexus, 3% are playing Assimilation, 10% are playing Crusher, 43% are playing Invasion, 30% are playing Vanguard, and 15% are playing Synaptic Nexus. Very interesting. I think so. I hope you do too. In terms of which one is winning, though, because that's what people want to know. They want to know which detachment's going to win me the games. Well, there isn't much to separate the win rates, to be honest. The 5 Tyranid factions that I've seen play in Pariah Hall have very similar win rates. So to get a bit of air, to see a bit of differentiation, I've also included the win rates of the top 25% of players. So let's look at Assimilation to start with. Well, the top line here is total Tyranid players have around about between 52 and 48% win rates. The top 25% of players have between a 68 and a 62% win rate. So that elasticity between the two, so there's 6 percentage points within total and the 6 percentage points within the top 25 difference. That's pretty impressive, right? It just shows you that skill level will reward you with these detachments. You don't, it's fairly even throughout, which I think is testament to the balance of this book, which is, to be honest, one of the key messages coming out of this. We're going to talk about a little bit more, but the balance that we have in the Tyranids book is awesome. Like, it's super good, and you can see it here. So Assimilation, only 11 players to point this out, so it is a very small data set, but they do have a 52% win rate, and the top 25% of players who have played Assimilation have a 68% win rate. So for context, that's them going between 3 and 2 or 4 and 1. Quite nice. Crusher Stampede has a 50% win rate, so the second highest, and it has much more players. It has nearly 4 times as many players at 42, but their top 25% of players have 67% win rate. Invasion Fleet, 192 players, so by far and away the most, with 49% win rate and 66% for the top 25%. Then 133 people have brought Vanguard to an event. They have pretty much the same win rate as Invasion Fleet, but their top 25% of players do slightly worse at 64%. And then finally, 70 people have taken Synaptic Nexus to an event. They've had a 48% win rate, but the top 25 has had 62% win rate. So it's fairly even throughout. Vanguard, I think a lot of people would have expected Vanguard to be higher up there, especially with the top 25% of players. But as we pointed out earlier in this meta, it's just still not quite there. It's good, but it's not broken. I think it's balanced, to be honest, right? I think it's pretty good. I think people are still evolving the lists. I love that whole new 3 Tyrannofex and Warriors lists. Like, that's super cool. If I had the models, I'd definitely be on that at the moment. Because it sounds like you get all the fun of Vanguard and you also get Rupture Cannons for days. All right. So moving on to the next bit, we have... okay, so the other thing that StatCheck like to talk about, and I think is really good, is how many people are going X and 1. How many people go undefeated and then get beaten. So this is like 4-1, I think it is, or 5. 4-1, or 5-1 if it's a 6-event game, etc. Sorry, tournament. And this is quite interesting because it just helps show like what percentage of people are getting there with these detachments. It also can give you an indication of which detachment do those people who go X and 1, what detachment they think is the best. So before Pariah Nexus, basically all the X and 1 players were Invasion Fleet. So there was 14 players who went X and 1 with Invasion Fleet. There was 7 people who went X and 1 with Unending Swarm, and there were 4 attendances that went X and 1 with Vanguard. That has massively increased after Pariah Nexus. 3 people have done it with Assimilation, 7 have done it with Crusher, 28 people, so that's double for Invasion Fleet. 5 people have done it with Synaptic Nexus. No one's done it with Unending Swarm because no one's taken it. And then 17 people, up from 4 before Pariah Nexus, have done it with Vanguard. So I think, I think that really kind of colours Vanguard a lot for me. Like it's good, but it'll always come across something that'll just punch it in the face, quite literally. And we'll talk about that when we get to the best matchups. All right. So there's another website that I recommend you look at. I think it's quite fun. I don't entirely understand it. I think there could be some better work done on definitions on it. But the 40k dirt sheets, and the link is in the bottom, but I'm pretty sure if you just Google 40k dirt sheets, you'll find it. What it does is it will tell you what are the most taken units per detachment, and they cut it down by people who go X and 1, stuff like that, which is quite interesting. Definitely worth looking at. If you're interested or just starting an army and you want to find out what people are taking, I think it's great. The data sets are still quite small, so what I've done is I've only done it for the factions that actually have quite a lot of players who've went X and 1, and then I've looked at what units they've taken the most, right? So on the left hand side you can see Invasion Fleet. So the top one is Exocrine. 96% of X and 1 in the Invasion Fleet list had at least one Exocrine, so it makes sense. Biovor is number 2, Maliceptor at 83% is number 3. Then 74%, the Neurotyrant, Lictor and Hive Tyrant are all there. And then between 48 and 57%, you've got a Tyrannofex, some Hormigants, Gargoyles and Gene Stealers. So if you are looking to do well with the Invasion Fleet and you're starting from a blank slate, you can do a lot worse than looking at these units. What I really wanted to show here is how diverse Vanguard and Invasion Fleet lists are. It's super cool because that top 10 I've just talked to you about is almost completely different for Vanguard Onslaught. So you've got 87%, you've got a Neurolictor and a Neurotyrant. At 80%, you've got a Lictor. At 73%, you've got a Winged Prime, Melee Warriors and Gene Stealers. At 67%, you've got Gargoyles and Broodlords. And at 60%, you've got Raveners and Biovor. So in there, you've got 2 units, I think, that are the same. 3 units that are the same. So like a third of units are the same. But they're not like, it's a Lictor, Gargoyles, and a Biovor. Like, it's not that oppressive, and I think that's pretty cool. Or 4 actually, because you've got a Neurotyrant as well. But again, they're not like game defining. It's not like taking 10 Wraith Knights. No, what are they called? Yeah, Wraith Knights with when they were good. Like, you put them in your list, that was defining what your army did. These are kind of like interesting pieces that you add to your list. So yeah, I think it's very cool. Hopefully you agree. And then looking at at the games we've played against which factions, where our highest win rates are. So what you're looking at now is a scatter graph. On the bottom, you've got the number of games played from left to right. So the further along you get is the higher the number of games, which means the data is more reliable. Of course, if we'd only played 5 games, it wouldn't be that reliable. But if we played 170 games, it's much more reliable. And on the left-hand side, you've got the win rate. I've put a bar across the middle so that you can see what the difference is. They don't have win rate by faction. So what they do is score differential, which I find much easier and much more interesting, to be honest. On average, what is the score difference between these 2 factions when they play? So I've done in red the factions I think are the most compelling, and then in yellow I've kind of circled some maybes, some probablys, let's call them that. So to start with, who's our best matchups? Orcs is a good matchup for us now. The average score differential is 10 points in our favour. Marines, 5 points in our favour. Dark Angels, 5 points in our favour. With much fewer games, we've got GSC and AdMech, where we've beaten them by about 10 points as well. So that's good. So they're our best matchups. I mean, let's be real, and I think this is kind of a common theme. They're some of the worst, or the worst performing factions in the game so far. So it makes sense that they would be our best matchups. But it's so cut and dry. It kind of feels like we're a bit of a bully, right? You know, if you're not a very good army, we will batter you. Likewise, if they're a very good army, they'll batter us. So we see Sisters have Sisters a pretty reliable amount of games played, about 142, and their score differential is 5 points to us, 5 points to them. So yeah, looks, you know, it's close games to be fair, but they generally beat us. Knights at -15 is the standout. Like, that one is a bit of an outlier. Knights aren't that great, but they still have got our number. And then looking at other armies, so T-Suns are obviously very good. Space Wolves are obviously very good, but the other one to watch out there is Demons. Demons, Blood Angels and World Eaters are all in one little batch. So I think one of the learnings we can take from this is one I actually pulled out the last time we looked at a bit of data. It's that we we shows this better on the next slide actually. So that is total Tyranids. Let's look at just Vanguard. I think I've just done Vanguard. Yes, so I've just done Vanguard on its own. So if you are a Vanguard lover like myself who just wants it to be good, I think this is quite telling. The score differentials are very different to total Tyranids. So our best matchups are GSC, AdMech. I mean, GSC and AdMech, again, small numbers, but Eldari, a pretty reasonable reliability score. Tau and Guard, also pretty good. So I think what that is really showing is Tyranids are really Vanguard Onslaught are really good at getting across the board and getting into these armies that don't really want to be touched too much. They're a bit squeamish when someone runs at them. However, our worst matchups, Blood Angels, World Eaters, Drukhari, Custodes, Chaos Knights, and Knights. It's two big trends there for me. One of them is big robots. We know that's a bad matchup for us, especially with Vanguard. The other one is melee armies. We still get bullied by other melee armies. You know, Blood Angels, World Eaters, Drukhari, Custodes, all want to punch you in combat. And when we get there, we're faster getting there, which is great, but we still can't trade as well as Blood Angels could have. We still suffer from fight on death with World Eaters. We still can't kill a Custodian. Drukhari just have more stuff, so we don't trade well with them. It's pretty rough. But I think that's still the common theme. So if you are playing Vanguard Onslaught, consider these melee matchups. They're the ones that are going to really be tricky. I think some of the other ones that you can just run across the table and chase people down are okay. But these melee ones, they're the ones you need to keep an eye on. And then I like these stats. I think they're funny. They're not exactly the most compelling. But in cute stats, Vanguard still sucks in the mirror. And Invasion Fleet and Nexus win slightly easier. And I mean that marginally easier. So what are we looking at? On the left-hand side, detachment performance in the mirror versus other Tyranids, obviously versus total Tyranids. So I can't say like Invasion versus Synaptic, etc. It's just Invasion versus Tyranids or Vanguard versus Tyranids. And we can see that, so of the, because we're 6% of the meta, we are number 3 for mirror matches. So there's a lot of mirror matches being played with Tyranid Players. Invasion Fleet has partaken in 50 different mirror matches, and it has a win rate of 44. So that means it is losing to some of the other ones. Is that back to front? That might be back to front. Yeah, it's back to front. So Invasion Fleet have a 56% win rate against in the mirror. Vanguard have a 43% win rate in the mirror, so they are losing more often. Synaptic Nexus has a 66%, so that's really strong. That's the #1 faction in the mirror. And because we're 6% of the meta, you could say that it's worth preparing for the mirror match. And then Crusher Stampede only has a 42% win rate in the meta. I guess they just get outscored as they run over their opponents. Assimilation Swarm has only had 3 games in the meta and lost all of them. It's quite interesting. And then another stat check look at is how many points do you need to score to have an 80% chance of winning the game. So they look at how often people win when they score X points, and that's how they figure this out. So the Tyranid average is 72. Assimilation Swarm has the highest bar for this, so you need to score 76 points, 4 points more, to have an 80% chance of winning the game if you're Assimilation Swarm. Crusher is in line with total Tyranid's average. Vanguard is just a little bit more, so 73 points they need to score. But Invasion Fleet and Synaptic Nexus they only need to score 1 point less. So again, completely pointless data here because it's so narrow margins, but interesting and fun nonetheless. So if I was to say, right, here's the key takeouts from this. These are my 4 big takeouts. Tyranid player numbers got a huge boost after the launch of Pariah Nexus. We got better, and as a result, people started coming to us, especially strong top 25% of players. Our win rate is going in the right direction as well, so it has improved, and the top 25% win approximately 3% more games than they did before as well. That's really good. Broadly speaking, we're a bit of a bully in my eyes, so we have bad games into the top meta armies, good games into the worst meta armies, and then Knights also just give us a hard time. So I guess nothing much has changed in that sense from before Pariah Nexus. But one of the absolute beautiful things at the moment, and one of my favourite things about Tyranids, is if you want to put a unit on a table, you can absolutely do it, because there are more units that are playable than ever before. And normally, if I was to say that, like, more units are playable, you'd expect our win rate to be the same or declining because people will be trying different things. But our win rate is growing at a time when people are just trying stuff, and that's awesome. Like, there's not many factions can say that. I think a lot of people are very jealous of Tyranids at the moment for things like that. And that's it, guys. So all done and over in 30 minutes, right? I didn't bore you too much to death with bar charts today. Cool. Well, if you enjoyed this, please put it in the comments, like and subscribe. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and I'm thinking about looking at what missions we are good at, because there's some data on the Goonhammer website, I think, that looks into that, and it'd be great to explore that with you and see what you guys think. If you think that's a good idea, let me know. Or if you'd just like to see more lists, just tell me and I can just post lists. Let's do that. Cool. I will catch you later, guys. Have a good one.